First, let's reflect on what the controller actually does for us. We know it helps host the data binding between the view and the model via the scope, but what else is there? Well, let's take a look at how the controller fits into an Angular application. A module can contain many components, including a controller, and a controller often interacts with factories or services to offload reusable tasks, but it also interacts with the view via the scope. The $scope is the glue between the controller and the view, and it effectively drives the presentation in the view. But how do we implement controllers and how do they get created? Well, to answer that, let's consider plain old vanilla JavaScript. Here we see a JavaScript function that's a constructor for an Avenger object. We can create an instance of an Avenger and set properties on that object. Every time we new up an Avenger, we get a new instance. Now let's look at a controller. This controller creates an Avenger and decorates the scope with properties, such as name or prop. When a controller is created, we always get a new one. That's a really important point. Creating a controller gives us a new instance, so controllers are effectively constructors. We can see this more clearly with the newer controller as syntax for controllers, which was introduced officially in version 1.2. Notice here we see the members are decorated on this instead of scope. Controller as is effectively syntactic sugar over scope. So we'll learn more about the differences between these two different approaches later in this module. But whether you use the classic scope syntax or the controller as syntax, you're constructing a new instance. But what about that scope? Does it just handle data binding? Well, not quite. It goes way beyond that to expose functionality, to kick off the Angular digest cycle, or using watches, or broadcasting or emitting messages, or listening for messages using the $on, or navigating up the scope chain using $parent. I think you get the point. It does quite a bit here. Now that we see how many roles the controller plays, let's start exploring some common scenarios that you're going to run into and how to tackle them.